Hello everyone, it is September 3rd, which means it's basically Halloween. Hi everyone, it's Angie here with the Gamer Crafting Podcast. Thank you for watching today. I'm going to remind you at the beginning today to please like and subscribe and drop a comment if you have anything to say about anything. Hi everyone, it's me. It's September. Pumpkin spice lattes are back at Starbucks. I'm wearing my basic witch shirt, which you can't really see because of the green screen, but it's there. It's a witch drinking a pumpkin spice latte. There's a watercolor that I did last year that I've turned into a shirt. I've not been lucky enough to get a pumpkin spice latte or one of the new cold press pumpkin foams as of yet because my trip through Euston Station last week, it showed me that there is no Starbucks in Euston Station anymore, along with not much in Euston Station anymore while they're going through some significant renovations. So first and foremost, I'm sorry that there was no podcast last week. As I just said, I was up attending a meeting in Cheshire last Thursday, and I was gone super all day, and I've been sick. I picked up something at Worldcon that's just been one of these really long, drag-out colds, the kind where you're just thinking, isn't it over yet? Can't I be done with this yet? So I'm finally starting to feel a bit more human. So I thought I would record a podcast today about the topic of preparing for a yarn show. So obviously we are deep in the preparation mode for Perth Festival of Yarn, which is this weekend, the 7th and 8th, I believe, in Perth, Scotland. So Perth is one of our favorite shows to do, and this will be our third time doing it. We've done Perth more than any other show, and it was also the first yarn show that we ever did. So the thing is, there's a lot of things that people don't realize about yarn shows and what vendors have to do in order to get from the I'm thinking about doing a yarn show to actually being there at the yarn show. So there's actually a lot more involved than a lot of people realize. So I thought I would just kind of take y'all through the process as to what everything, what all has to be considered and taken care of from A to Z, basically. So when you first decide that you want to do a yarn show, obviously you have to apply. Most yarn shows are application only, and so you'll have to apply in order to be accepted. So there's obviously shows that we've not done because we've not gotten accepted for them, and that's fine. Sometimes it's not the right audience. Sometimes they don't necessarily like your vibe. Sometimes they're just really oversubscribed and they have a lot of loyalty to their vendors that have been there since the beginning, and there's not a lot of open spaces left. So you apply to a yarn show, which usually involves sending them links to your shop, sending them photos of your yarns, sending them information about your business and what you sell, and sometimes shows will request kind of your average price point. So they'll ask, what's the cheapest thing you sell? What's the most expensive thing that you sell? For us, the cheapest thing that we sell at shows is going to be the pin badges and the stickers, and the higher end of things is going to be the big, long mini skein gradients or packs if we're doing a collaboration pack. So you apply and you cross your fingers and you hope, and then you get the email that says you're in. Great. Well, yeah, it is good, but now there's a lot of other things you have to consider. So first up, when you get accepted, most shows will want you to pay a deposit within a week or two of being accepted. So the deposit is usually half of whatever your stand fee is. If you're unsure of what a stand fee is, when we vend at shows, we don't get to do that for free. We have to pay in order to be there. Some venues are more expensive than others for the organizers to rent out, which means that the stand fees are higher. If you've been to a show that has one of those really nice professional looking shell schemes, that makes stand fees significantly higher as well. So while they look really nice and they're super easy for setup, it also means that we're paying higher stand fees for that. So you're going to have to pay half of your stand fees. If you get a double stand, it's probably going to be somewhere in the realm of £300 to £400. It really depends show to show. If you're a show organizer and your costs are cheaper than that, don't necessarily feel you have a need to drop into the comments and correct me. Every show is different. Venues are different and they cost different amounts to show organizers. But on the average, that's probably what you're going to be looking at paying, especially for some of the bigger, more well-known shows. So let's say you decided to take a double stand, and so the stand fees are £300, just for giggles. The stand fees are £300, so you're going to have to pay £150 up front within, like I said, a couple of weeks of being accepted. And then you're also going to have to consider, where are you staying during this yarn show? Is it someplace local to you and you can just drive back and forth? Because then great, you don't have any extra fees, you're solid. But if you're having to travel and there's no way that you can travel back and forth between where you live and the show, between if it's a weekend show, then you're going to have to consider accommodation, which obviously isn't cheap, especially if you're in more of a metropolitan area, especially if there's other events going on during the yarn show, like sporting events that can drive the prices up. In the past, we've opted to camp during yarn shows, which has worked out really well for us, but it's not super always that great in the autumn because weather can be very unpredictable across the UK. Last year, we camped when we did Perth Festival of Yarn, and the campground was lovely, and Gemma Snuggly Stars Yarn was there, and it was really chill and really nice. And then the day after Perth, so we had broken everything down, but we had planned to stay a couple of extra days before we drove back, because it's quite a long drive for us. The winds were at like 45 miles per hour, and while our tent was fine, it was solid, it was stable, it was loud. So this year we've opted to just stay in the local travel lodge instead, because that was that was a bit much. So if you're considering that accommodation, if you're staying, the minimum number of nights will probably cost you, I don't know, between £200 and £300-ish, depending. It depends whether you're just going to stay longer, what day you're arriving. Obviously, weekends are always more expensive for accommodation, regardless of where you are. So accommodation is probably, what, £200 to £300-ish, unless you get some sort of miraculous, amazing deal. So if you add that onto your stand fees of approximately £300, you're looking at between £500 and £600 already just to do the show, and that's not considering how you're going to get there. If you're driving, well, then you're just paying gas, and hopefully you have a very petrol efficient vehicle. But some people have to rent vans because they take a triple stand, or they can't fit everything that they have into their smaller vehicles that they use on an everyday basis. We're lucky in that while we have a small car, most of what we sell is yarn or things that are smushy, so it's not as difficult to fit everything into the car. However, if you're selling things that are in boxes or what have you, or stuff that's fragile, obviously that's not going to be an option. You're probably going to have to rent a van. So that's another expense on top of that. I don't really know how much that would be because I've not rented a van here. So I don't know, maybe you'll have to ask someone else, or just, but anyway, it's a consideration that's an extra expense for a lot of vendors. And then there's some vendors who opt to take a train or fly or another transit option, and that's cost as well, especially if it's a show outside their country of origin, which I will get to later. For example, when we do woolen over in Dublin, we have to take our car on the ferry, and the ferry's about £300-ish. So in order for us to do woolen, if you're considering the average stand fee plus accommodation average plus the ferry, you're looking at £900 before you've even set foot in the door, which is, that's quite an expense. That's not, it's not something that everyone can just, toss around. The other thing is that if you are brand new to doing shows, you're going to have to sort out liability insurance. Every show will request that you have between £2 and £5 million worth of liability insurance, and depending on what insurance provider you go through, I use a company called Graham Sykes, I believe. It depends on it depends what you sell. It depends how much your turnover is in a year. It depends where you're going. It depends if the venues have insurance and security. For us, our yearly insurance to do yarn shows is around £100. That doesn't include our business insurance though, which is different and costs different. But I'm not going to talk about that today because it's a separate issue. So you've applied to a show, you've got in, you've paid your stand fees, your deposit, and the other half you've prepaid for your accommodation, you've booked your transit if necessary, and you've paid and sent your liability insurance off to the show organizers, and you also have to send them a risk assessment. So a risk assessment is basically something that you have to have in order to say that you understand the risks in running your stand. It's something that they need for their insurance, and it's non-negotiable. You have to send this. So, for example, on our gamer crafting risk assessment, it says, well, there's a danger of one of us slipping or tripping over and falling while we're carrying stuff into the venue or while we're setting up. There's the dependent risk that a grid wall will fall over, which I have seen happen at shows before. Sometimes the legs aren't sturdy enough. Sometimes our people pull on the stands too much. It's unlikely, it's just yarn on there. It's unlikely that it's actually going to do anyone any serious damage, but it's something that you have to have on your risk assessment regardless. So that is something you have to put some thought into before you send it off to the show organizers, who probably want it earlier than, the day before the show starts. Okay, so you've sorted out your paperwork and you've paid up front for all of this stuff, and now you're starting to actually prepare for the show. So that means you have to pre-order in all the undyed yarn that you think you're going to need for the show. I'm speaking from an indie dyer's perspective. Obviously, if you're somebody who does hand-fired pottery yarn bowls, then it's going to be a different level of thing that you're ordering in. But the point is that you're having to order an extra on top of what you would normally sell in a month. So that's an extra thing that you have to kind of budget for and know that it's coming. For example, when we do yarn shows, a normal sort of weekend yarn show, 2 days over a weekend, we usually take between 20 and 30 kilos of yarn to one of these yarn shows. Part of that is trying to figure out what yarn you're going to take to this yarn show. Trying to second guess and figure out what it is that people are going to want at a show is a little bit, it's a little bit, you can't really quite figure out. It's a guessing game. You never know what's going to be popular one year and not the next. Even if you're watching the trends and popular patterns and stuff that's trending, sometimes it doesn't matter. I've had shows where I have weirdly sold out of the neon yellow high voltage color, and then other times where nobody touches it. It really just depends who's walking through the door, but trying to second guess that means that you're going to have to take a little bit of everything until you know what tends to sell and what doesn't. So as you're prepping for a show, well, if you're an indie dyer prepping for a show, obviously I can't speak for any other vendors that are selling other things, but for me it's dyeing all of this extra yarn on top of what I would usually sell and release in a month, which includes, small collections of repeatable shades. It includes all of the clubs, anything else I feel inspired to do, wholesale orders, etc. This is on top of all of that. So the couple of months before a bigger yarn show like Perth Festival of Yarn usually means that I'm running around like a chicken with my head cut off, and I'm just generally stressed, and I pick fights with my wife, and it's just it's one of the reasons that we've pulled back a little bit from doing yarn shows, because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. And it's a lot of work on top of maintaining our gamercrafting.com website. So, so when you're preparing for a yarn show, you're going to be thinking, well, what do I want to take? What do I need extras of that I suspect I might sell more of? For example, I did a random dye a couple of weeks ago using the reverse rainicorn format, but using UV reactive neon dyes instead of the usual dyes I would use. And I made a joke about calling it reverse ravicorn, and I showed Eva, who organizes the Perth Festival of Yarn, and she said, oh my god, you have to bring that, that's amazing. And then I posted it up on Instagram, and loads of people were really into it. I posted it in my Instagram story, so I thought, well, I better take more than just 5 skeins of this then. I tend to dye in batches of 5. So I thought, well, I better take more than 5 then. So then I ended up dyeing extras of that, and that's not something that I had necessarily budgeted for time-wise in my head. But they're done, they're dry, they're labeled, will be packed today. She said, staring off camera into the enormous pile of yarn that still needed to be twisted and labeled and then packed. So the other thing is that if you're doing a yarn show, maybe you want to do a collaboration with an indie designer. Maybe you want to do a collaboration with another indie dyer. Maybe you want to release new things, new yarns. Maybe you want to release some new project bags. I don't know. It just depends on what it is that you want to maybe showcase. The thing is that when you're making your application to a yarn show, many times they'll ask, do you have anything that you want to launch at our yarn show? I always try to have a little something because it kind of just zhuzhes things up a little bit and gives me something to talk about when I do a quick little Instagram live at the beginning of the day on the first day. So for Perth Festival of Yarn, we'll be launching the Halloween collection, which is up for pre-order on the website. But physical skeins will not be shipped out until we get back from Perth because the batches that I dyed will be going with us to Perth. And I did not have the time nor the inclination to dye up double batches of it all before I left because just no. So you might also decide that you want to launch, I don't know, yarn packs. There's all kinds of things that you can decide to launch at a yarn show. Hopefully, fingers crossed, I'm going to be relaunching my collaboration with Third Vault Yarns at Perth. Between the two of us, we've been just busy. Lola had a stand at Worldcon, and then as soon as she got back from Ireland, she had Southern Wool Show down in Newbury. And between that and me being sick, we've not made it back into the dye studio, but we're trying to make it work anyway. So keep your eyes and ears open for that. I think it's going to work. I think we'll have it at Perth and shortly after on the website. I hope. So the other thing is that a lot of shows are going to ask you to help promote the event because people don't know that an event is happening. They can't come there to buy your things. So I'm going to ask you to post about it on social media. Sometimes they'll send you flyers to put in orders that you send out if you do business online, or if you run a local yarn store. And that's an important part of the process. I think, yes, we're paying to be there. And yes, it's the responsibility of the show organizer to do their own marketing, be that Facebook ads or leafleting or I don't know. I don't have any desire in my body to run a show, so I will let them deal with their own marketing campaigns. But it's important to tell people that you're going to be there. For example, I sent out an email last night saying, hey, the September clubs are open. Also, we're going to be at Perth, and so orders that are made now will be shipped when we get back next week. And I had somebody reply to the email and say, oh, I had no idea you were going to be there. I wasn't going to go there, but I've decided now I'm going to go there. You know, not only are you helping yourself out with that, you're helping out the event organizer, and you're also helping out your fellow vendors, because somebody who comes to see you probably isn't only going to buy things from you. They're going to have a wander around. They're going to buy things from other people. They're going to chit chat and make friends. And so you're just making the community just a more robust place. So now you've prepped for the show. You've done the things. And now you're getting ready to pack for the show. Your experience may vary. If you have a rented van, packing might not be quite as stressful as it is when you drive a 2001 Nissan Micra and you're trying to fit 20 to 30 kilos of yarn in it, plus grid walls, plus everything else. I'm going to read to you my packing list for Perth Festival of Yarn. This is my bullet journal. It says, dinosaurs eat man, women inherit the earth. I'd love that as a tattoo, but I know somebody with that as a tattoo, so I feel like that'd be weird now. Anyway, it's a quote from Jurassic Park, if you didn't know. I expect most of you probably know. So I'm going to read to you my packing list. This is for Perth. I wrote this yesterday. Perth packing list. iZettle and SumUp, both of which are wireless card processors. Extra USB cords. Outfit that I wear at the show, which at Woolen I showcased more of a steampunky sort of gothic vibe as opposed to my usual sort of flight suit. Anyway, the yarn, obviously, the grids, the hooks. I'm unlikely to forget the yarn or the grids, but things like hooks sometimes would get overlooked. Hooks, samples to have on the stand, and here I have taking the Essie shawl, designed by Anna Nikapirovics, some socks that I had made up as samples, including a hat, some mitts, a toph hat by Woolly Wormhead, and what else did I decide? I think I'm going to take the brioche kitty hat, because I keep forgetting to take that, and I should, because it shows off lovely favorite yarn and mohair. Also, yes, I am wearing cat ears. I knitted these 4 years ago? I don't know. It's been a hot minute. Okay, carrying on with my list. Cash float, which is becoming increasingly more obnoxious to get because local bank branches don't really want to give you a cash float. So it's going to be really fun when our local bank branch decides that they're done giving us cash floats. Every time Sarah goes in there, that's usually Sarah's job, because I hate doing it. Whenever Sarah goes in there to ask for a cash float is usually to make change with, obviously, if you didn't know that. Cash float is to make change with. Every time she goes in there and she says, oh, can I have... bunch of 5s, 10s, and then like 30 pounds worth of pound coins. They're always like, oh, well, we don't really know if we have it. You're a bank. Why are you not keeping this? Thing's there. And obviously things become increasingly more digital. Banks don't really have maybe as much of a need to keep as much of change hanging around. But for those of us running events, come on, please. I also have on this list my apron, my show apron, which holds the cash float and various other things like the card reader, extra cords, sonic screwdriver. No, I'm kidding. I wish I had one of those. Directions to the accommodation and between the accommodation and the venue, because we've had issues in the past. We won't at Perth necessarily because we've been there before, but I usually put it on here just in case. We've had issues before where like the GPS just doesn't know where our accommodation is, and so not having those printed directions was a crucial and critical failure. I rolled a 1. I also have on here my steampunk goggles, printed patterns that we sell on the stand for some of the samples that we have. The big box of enamel pins, so that's all the yarn prime pins, and then we're still waiting on the Yarn Hoard and the Keep Crafting, Keep Gaming pins. Fingers crossed they'll arrive tomorrow in time for us to pack them up. So the enamel pins and then the pin badges, so the small metal ones. Stickers, tape, thumbtacks, blue tack, which is like sticky tack for the Americans watching. The big roller banner that we had made about last January, and then I like ripped it immediately but then taped it. We didn't end up using it at a few of the shows this year because it was too small, but I'd really like to use it at Perth, so I'm going to take it. Signs that tell people how much things are. We don't tend to price everything individually because that's annoying and would take forever, so we use a color coding system at shows, which allows me to just do a quick blurb of a highlighter color on the yarn band or a sticker of the same color. Extra battery packs, so like these. This is not gonna show up in the screen. Oh no, it did. So battery packs like these, which tend to hold, I don't know, a couple of full phone charges. We have 4 of them now because they always get used at yarn shows, between my phone, Sarah's phone, now the gimbal that we use for filming at shows, the card processing units, like everything needs power. Battery packs are my lifeblood. Also these are solar, so they like regain some charge if you leave them on a sunny day in the dashboard of your car. It's nifty. So then I have other things on here like taking the project bags, taking the tote bags, headphones, taking the sheets that go along the back of the grid walls to make things look a bit more cohesive, I guess. Taking the clips that hold the sheets on, which I've forgotten the last like 4 shows we've done. Taking my laptop and the charger for any reason that we might need it. You never know. Pens, notebooks, books, the gimbal, and then other things that we need like pajamas, toothpaste, socks, etc. I'm not going to read through all that because it's boring. So obviously that's a considerable packing list. Obviously there are some other people who do shows so often and so successfully that they don't need packing lists anymore because it's just second nature, but I can't exist without a list. I need lists in my life. So I have a bullet journal. You'll also see that my bullet journal's not really very pretty. It's very functional. I was thinking towards the new year, I'll show you all how I boringly set up my bullet journal for the new year. For example, here's this week. It's just a list. That's all. It's just a list. All right, so, oh look, and here on Tuesday, it says film podcast. I guess I can tick that off. So you've packed up your car, and now you need to travel to the venue, or to the event, or to your accommodation. You need to get there. When doing international shows, it adds an extra level of like, yikes, when you perhaps maybe almost miss your flight or your ferry, which has totally happened to us and to other people before, whether that's due to the seas are too rough and the ferry can't go, so now you've been pushed to the next morning's ferry, or whether it's because of a traffic jam, which we almost missed our ferry going over to Woollen this past June because there was massive flooding on one of the roads that we were on, and the backup was like 2 hours long. It took forever to get through it, and the water was so high they had like police guiding people through the flooded water one car at a time. I wasn't sure that our micro was going to make through it, but it damn well did. I know that there was a couple of vendors on the way to Woollen who had car trouble, and so they ended up missing their ferry or whatever the case was, and that was just another added layer of stress for them, which sucked. So you get to the venue, and it's setup day, and you're setting everything up, and hopefully you didn't forget any of your legs for the grid wall. I don't actually have that on my list. Okay, so you've made it to the venue and you're setting up, and hopefully you didn't forget your legs or the fiddly screws that hold the legs to the grids or your other display equipment, and hopefully you didn't forget tape because you always end up needing tape, and hopefully everything's smooth and you didn't forget anything because you had your list and you're setting everything up. And you've set everything up, and hopefully it doesn't take you 5 hours like it took us for Perth last year because I was launching way too much stuff at one time and didn't know how to set everything up and drove my wife crazy. So something that vendors have to consider at shows, even shows that do have security, is worrying about theft, whether it's theft, overnight or whether it's theft during a show. It's almost unavoidable, and it's frustrating, but it's almost something you just kind of have to accept as it's just going to happen. There's not really a lot that you can do to completely prevent it. You can do things like set up your stand in a way where there's not a lot of blind spots. You can do things like talk to people and I mean, I talk to everybody anyway. Not sitting behind a table, but like if somebody wants to try and steal something from you, they're probably going to try and find a way. And like I said, it sucks, but that's kind of just the reality. The other thing to consider is that sometimes people who visit a show might not be like the nicest people. I'm not talking about the other vendors who are lovely, the show organizers who have always been lovely. We've never had an issue where that's concerned. Sometimes it's the visitors that kind of rock up and say things that leave you scratching your head and going, wait, did that just happen? For example, we were at a show and a woman was looking at our pride pins, and then she turned and she was looking at yarn, and she said, oh yeah, I'm looking for some yarn, but I don't want anything too gay though. And she just kind of turned and looked at me and she went, no offense though. Which, I don't know, it's not necessarily mean, but it's a little bit weird. And if people are going to say that to me, I have no doubt in my mind that that's one of the reasons that some Black and Indigenous people of color are hesitant to vend at yarn shows, because people have weird ideas about things and will just open their mouths and just let whatever's in their head come out without passing that through any kind of filter in their brain. So it's definitely something to consider when somebody tells you that they don't want to do a yarn show. There could possibly be a real good reason for that. So in conclusion, if your favorite vendor is at your favorite show, we're doing it because we want to be there. Shows are a lot of work, but they're also very rewarding. Shows are very rewarding that we get to meet people that we talk to online, and we get to interface with other people within the industry, and we get to wander around and eat food and perhaps drink gin and have a lot of fun and, create some really excellent, long-lasting friendships, so on and so forth. So if we're there, it's because we want to be there. Nobody's dragging us off to a yarn show. There's so much work involved in doing it. We're only there because we want to be there, of course. Obviously, there are some other businesses that have different business models. Maybe their business model is to do as many shows as they can in a year. That absolutely would not work for us at all. It wouldn't work for us because our car is small. We don't have a lot of room. Driving back and forth across the UK all year round sounds incredibly stressful and would be very hard to maintain for us. But like I said, every business is different. Everyone's different. Your mileage may vary. So we're there because we want to be there. There has been a few times, well, not a few times. There's been a time or two, let's say, where we have lost money doing a show, which is always really demoralizing given the amount of work that goes into it. So between, paying for accommodation, for your transit, for the stand itself, and then perhaps taking time off work to prepare for the show, if that's something that you need to do, sometimes you end up looking at how much you make in a show and you don't quite break even. And that's always a bit disappointing. I mean, at least if you break even, you can think, well, it wasn't super great, but I got to meet people and I got to hang out with people in the industry, and that was really fun, and I had good experiences, and I talked to some rad people, and I made some new friends. But sometimes when you don't even break even, you're just like, well, I guess we're going to sadly drive home now, not having recouped our costs. So yeah, in any case, I just wanted to kind of show you all what happens when you do a show and other things that have to be considered. So if you're wanting to kind of see that in action, well, from the packing and setup part, then you can watch next week's podcast, or it might end up being the week after. I'm not totally sure, but I'm going to be filming a lot for our journey up to Perth Festival of Yarn and what we're doing there, so on and so forth, and so you can all kind of see what goes into the behind the scenes of it. I know I promised you behind the scenes, like behind the green screen, to show you where we dye yarn, but in the midst of the complete chaos of preparing for a show and me coming back from Worldcon feeling sick and being sick, I just didn't want to. I'm sorry, I just didn't want to. It felt like a weird intrusion when everything was so chaotic, and I knew that if I was showing people, like, look how chaotic things are just before a show, we don't have any space, I knew that I would get people in the comments being like, oh, well, if you just did this or just did that, which is stuff that we do normally, but doesn't necessarily get done the week of a show. I don't know. I'm probably overthinking this. The point is, it will happen eventually, but it didn't happen this week. So, that will be at some point, I don't know, in the future. So we have Perth Festival of Yarn this weekend. As soon as I am finished recording this podcast, I'm going to lunchtime and have lunch. And then I'm going to edit the podcast. I'm going to get it up. And then I've got to twist and label and pack a whole enormous mountain of yarn. And then once it's packed, then what else do I have on my to-do list for today? I broke it all down by day because that was the only way that I could feel like I had any sort of control over my life, which I don't really. Right, film, podcast, edit, pack yarn, assemble the oh shit box. Oh yes, I forgot about that. That's basically the box where all like the tape and the extra zip ties and pens and like stuff that you find that you end up needing but you didn't think you were going to need, that goes in that box. And then I have to sew buttons on something, and then I have to pack our clothes. Yeah, that's doable. I can totally do that. And then I'm probably gonna, my hair's looking a little sad. Maybe I should dye my hair today. And then tomorrow I will be packing the car, which is fine but takes a lot of effort, and I reckon I will hate it more tomorrow because I've been sick. I am definitely on the mend now, but So tomorrow I'm loading the car and downloading podcasts and or audiobooks to listen on our drive up to Perth. Sarah does all the driving for shows. I don't have a license here in the UK, so Sarah does all the driving. So I am navigator slash not DJ, because we're not listening to music. I don't know what you would call it for podcasts and audiobooks, but anyway, that's my job in the car. I just dropped a whole bunch of stickers on the ground. Well done. And then Thursday we'll be leaving early in the morning. Early in the morning. Probably like 4 or 5 to drive up to Perth, which if we don't have traffic, touch wood, it'll take about 8 or 9 hours. There was one year that it took 13 hours because we hit 2 traffic jams on the way up. That sucked. So if we don't hit any traffic, we should be there sort of late afternoon, and then we'll grab dinner and then crash out. And then Friday we set up, and then Saturday and Sunday is the show! And then Monday we'll be dead in the hotel sleeping and not getting out of bed, and except for food. And then, yeah. Anyway, so that's kind of what our plan looks like for the week. I hope you all have a fabulous week. If you're interested in the Halloween collection, they are open for pre-orders on the website, along with the September clubs. This month's geeky theme is paranormal, which is sort of easing into the Spooktober sort of thing, because I'll ship it at the end of September and you'll get it in October. So, paranormal is this month's theme, and there's also a new inspiration photo up for the new luxury space club, and some other things. Anyway, so that's there if you're interested. And I'm gonna go have lunch, and my throat is really dry, so I'm gonna drink some 87 cups of tea while I work through that enormous, terrifying pile of yarn. I'm gonna make Sarah help me. I say make. She's willing. She's helping me last night. We were up until like 2, twisting and labeling yarn. 2.